Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another lecture. And this lecture is part of a series. It is actually under the playlist called Creation Series under my channel. So I think we're probably about 6 or 7 lectures in. And this lecture is a continuation of the lecture last week that focused on the fall of the angels, the fallen angels, and the descension or fall or distortion of the original soul essences or angels that came from Venus. Now, these waves of angelic consciousnesses of divine humans from Venus came in the Lemurian epoch. I think the first wave was around, or the most recent wave in that regard was around 18 million years ago. And there's been sort of a repeating of patterns ever since, and the ripening of certain patterns and continuation of certain patterns ever since. And so this information is really, really important to have because it's like a key that we can use to interpret a lot of the events and behaviors around us. Now, one of the main things that we talk about in this lecture series that I have under the Creation series is that you can really first begin to discern the quality of information, the quality of someone's consciousness, if they're a teacher or a leader or something like that, based on understanding that there are two basic paths in humanity, in life. Usually in motivational speaking or psychology, they boil it down to love and fear. But when you go deep into esoterica, you can actually start to attribute and associate a lot more patterns to that. And that's what we're going to do here. So in this lecture series, I associate the two streams with various different ideologies. But ultimately, one is what I call the Christ stream, and often in anthroposophy is called the Christ impulse or the Christ stream. The other stream is like the antichrist stream. All right. It's the degenerative stream. It is the stream of devolution, degeneration, and essentially the actual destruction of whatever soul essence that you have. And obviously, it's not something I think that a lot of teachers want to talk about because spirituality is probably usually used as a form of escapism today, not as a real serious line of study and development. So the degenerative path or the lower path or the path of the fallen angels is not really very deeply understood. It's not discussed. It's not hashed out intensely. And so for that reason, we are coming into these topics unaware. We're coming into a lot of situations in society that are directly related to fallen angel consciousness, to the degenerative path, to the antichrist path, to whatever language you want to use. It doesn't matter what language you want to use. It exists in every single tradition. Esoteric Christianity, Eastern tradition, New Age, it's all the same thing. We're just calling it different words. But that path of degeneration, that path of evil, that path of the fallen angels, it exists today and it's alive and well. And we have to learn to understand what that is. It is within you. It is within me. It is within everybody. Everybody has that little bit of dark and light. And so everybody has a choice. And so everybody should know about this. There is no hiding. Okay. So the sooner that we can talk about this, the sooner that we can understand this, the better. And also, it does get to a point in development where you can't really understand the organic evolutionary path in society or the ascension path or the path of regeneration, of rebirth, the Christ consciousness path or the, Christ stream. We don't really get to know that path of genuine evolution and unfoldment unless we have a period of training and understanding on what the opposite is. And so that is absolutely what these teachings are, is that you cannot expect to very deeply know your light or recognize the light and evolution in this world unless you see the darkness and the devolution impulse. And so that is what we're going to be going even more deeper in today. And we're going to discuss the importance of ensoulment, because when we understand that point of ensoulment, it flips our understanding into the right direction. It flips it into inward growth. It flips us into understanding that the solar system is really a school for souls and that all planetary spheres are connected. All suns, all fixed stars are connected in some way. And so understanding it this way is the only way we can really understand also the cosmos around us, is as in an empowered way. If we see the cosmos around us, the planets, other star systems as just this physical thing to be mined or exploited or exist, but in a totally material way or in a way that we can't really understand or relate to because it's too far away, then we're going to enter into this knowledge in a disempowered way, and we're going to enter into delusion, because how we actually understand the cosmos is first spiritually, because different planets actually really represent different planes and densities, and you can't enter into understanding without knowing that. You can't, no matter how much you want to, you can't make it so that you're not a spiritual being. Even if you completely deny the reality of your own spirit, of the reality that you have an astral body and etheric body, that one day you will pass on and live beyond this plane, you can deny that all you want in your life and call that science. But that does not change the reality that we are spiritual beings and that the cosmos is actually a spiritual place, primarily, before it was ever physical. So it's very important that we enter into the age of Aquarius, which is a cosmic age of understanding, with the right foundation, right? Not in a materialistic way, but first in a spiritual way, and understanding that the material plane and material forms form around the spiritual understanding, not backwards, right? So in our last lecture, we really got into the topic of Venus, and Venus as the higher aspect of the earth. So when I talk about fallen angels, when I'm talking about beings for Venus, we're not talking about aliens. We're not talking about Valthor or, even people showing up in ships. We're not really talking about a lot of things, even that are sort of in the collective consciousness with Venus. We're really talking about something much, much, much deeper. And Venus, and really all planets to varying degrees, are really just other aspects of the Earth and the Sun. So nothing in that sense is really alien. There's always a way to evaluate where a being or where an entity is coming from, their level of development, and basically everything about them. Human beings have a natural way of discerning each other and also beings from other planes and other worlds. The idea that we have to evaluate a being from another sphere based on what they tell us or just physicality or something is a completely backwards way to go about it. The reality is that every single planetary sphere is interconnected in some way, and every single star is also interconnected in some way. And that some way is actually the development of the cosmos itself and the timing and development of our solar system and all of that. So it's all basically one big clock or one big timing. And humanity is sort of like one giant expression, if you will. And that's really what a lot of us are craving to understand, I think, in the spiritual cosmic scene. And I think in ufology, is we understand that there's more going on than just this earth. And we understand, and many people are beginning to remember, because again, the age of Aquarius is a cosmic age where we begin to think and understand beyond the earth, right? But the risk here is that we deny the earth and that we reject the earth and that we reject our humanity. One of the biggest um, uh, disasters that we face as a species is to actually reject our humanity and to reject also a correct interaction with our inner world. And so this is something that a lot of people will begin to do through trying to escape into cosmic ideas, trying to escape into space, trying to actually leave the planet, trying to actually identify as inhuman. We can see this already beginning with lots of people taking up style choices and identities that are inhuman. And so the fastest way to avoid your trauma and your pain is to deny your humanity and to identify as something inhuman. And then when you spiritualize that, or you make up stories that are spiritualizing that process, it becomes even more dangerous, because the spiritual level of your consciousness is supposed to be the aspect that pulls you out of delusion. And so when we spiritualize these delusions, we fall deeper and deeper and deeper into the very darkness that we are trying to avoid. And so the answer is to understand that humanity actually evolves in the solar system like it's a school. And interacting with beings from other spheres is part of how we evolve. And it happens at certain times, very specific times. And these overlappings are usually called stargates. And they only open and close at certain times. And so it's not really an open free for all in a sense, but it's really like a school where certain stargates open and close, or certain planetary spheres will overlap at certain times. And the whole reason isn't just exploration. It's not just like other beings coming and wanting to just explore and understand humanity or anything like that. A lot of the times we really humanize interdimensionals and we really try to make them like us. But the reality is why beings from other spheres can even come is that there is an evolutionary purpose for that relationship. So nothing appears here unless there's an evolutionary purpose for that. There is nothing random, right? And when we understand the cosmos as a series of gates and windows and as an interdimensional space, we begin to understand that. And we're really right at the precipice of that. The other thing that can become very confusing about this conversation at this point is that there's also a sphere around the planet. And I've talked about this quite a bit because there's probably the most amount of confusion around this reality. And it is that this realm around the earth, which is called an anthroposophy, it's called the eighth sphere. But you'll also find it referenced as the moon realm. Sometimes it's sort of connected to properties of Saturn. But it is essentially like a realm around the moon, around the earth, that is basically in between the moon and the earth. That's where we could visualize it. And what happens is that whatever enters into our earth, and whatever is part of the earth's evolutionary life, so human beings, but also if there is a period of beings being from other spheres, like the divine humans that came from Venus, what ends up happening is if they go against God, and if you go against natural evolution, you essentially get trapped in this moon realm or the moon lock or the eighth sphere or the lower astral plane, and you cannot get out. And so what ends up happening over time, and we've been dealing with this eighth sphere for a very long period of time. So it is very full of different types of entities and beings and tulpas and egregores. It is stuffed, chocked full at this point. And so one of the biggest issues is that a lot of people think that these beings from the eighth sphere or from the moon realm or the lower astral plane, they think that these beings are aliens because that's what these entities will tell you, because they don't want you to think that they're fallen. Okay. It's much easier to tell humanity that you are an entity, a star being, a being from another sphere, and have this mystique about you than it is to tell humanity that you're a fallen being that has gone against God, that's gone against natural evolution. And now you're trapped in this lower plane, and that you basically need to attach to them to feed on them. So these beings need to attach to humanity to feed, because they've turned their back against God, because they've denied their own evolution and they've not passed their last initiation. They're fallen. They actually have no way of getting life force energy, right? You know, you have to be in alignment with your heart. You have to be in alignment with God, with Christ within you, you know, with the solar forces. You have to be in alignment to receive energy. And even people who are seeking to become enlightened, it's even hard to get your chi and your prana flowing then. But if you deny God and you deny the natural order of things and you want to play God and you turn evil and dark, you essentially begin distorting and you turn dark, and you cannot get that life force energy straight from the source. And so all of the beings in the eighth sphere and in the moon realm of the lower astral plane are vampiric and they're parasitic. And they need to feed on humanity. They need to feed on humanity. You're a food source. We're a food source. And without that, they're destroyed. They're disempowered. And so there is a tremendous effort by beings within the eighth sphere to manipulate humanity because their survival depends on it. And these beings will present themselves as aliens. These fallen angels will present themselves as the creators of humanity, as these aliens, as basically whatever will work. And because we're coming into that cosmic age of Aquarius, because we're coming into this space age, you know, we've got every single billionaire you can name suddenly wants to build a spaceship and colonize a planet or the moon. You know, why is that? Okay, so suddenly we were coming into the space age, so all of the darker entities in the eighth sphere, they are going to say that they're aliens. They are going to say that they're beings from other spheres. And there's a part of us that falls very prey to this, because deep, deep down inside of us, we know the solar system is a school. We know that there are beings that can come from other spheres, and that we once did walk with what we would consider gods in the age of Hyperborea and the age of Lemuria. Even the beginning of Atlantis, we walked with the gods when the human form was in a developing state. You know, we walked with very advanced beings. And so there's a part of us deep inside of our own heart, deep inside of our own memory, where we did walk with beings from other spheres. They did walk amongst us. Now, the earth at that time was in more of an etheric state, so it wasn't as solid. That makes a big difference. And because most of the time when you think about like Star Trek or interdimensional travel and interacting with all these different races, that actually exists in the astral plane. That's actually what civilization is like in the astral plane. When we're in the physical plane, civilization is not like that. We are sort of locked in the physical plane, and we're much more isolated. And the whole point of development in the material physical plane is the development of the I, or the individuality. And so where we are in development is actually more about isolation, and we're not actually in a phase where beings from other spheres, gods, walk amongst us anymore. We are them now. And the Venusian divine beings actually ensouled into humanity. So the highest of the Venusian gods, or the highest of the alien gods, or the highest of the angelic divine human gods, whatever language you want to use, actually ensouled into humanity. So they're actually within you, within me. And there's actually very advanced souls that now incarnate into the human body. Okay, they incarnate into a human form. And the whole point of walking alongside humanity in those earlier epochs, in the Hyperborean age, in the Lemurian age, in the Atlantean age, was actually to prepare the form, the developing form, to ensoul into it. And, if you look at my whole video series on the Polarian epoch, the whole epoch was created because these divine angelic beings were essentially beaming their consciousness down into this dimension and forming this whole realm. And then every epoch since then basically is more solidification and more individuation of the consciousness of those divine beings, which were in a sense actually us. Okay? So we have to understand the synthesis of life. We may be individuated, we may be individuals, but everything that we've experienced is through a synthesis with the spiritual hierarchies, or with the angelic hierarchies. We exist as a synthesis of them and as an extension of them. There's no way to escape that. And how that works is through ensoulment. Is eventually the human form on the planet builds up to a certain point where it actually has more organs of perception and more power than the divine human before it, more potential. And at that point, you get ensoulment. And so the highest beings from the prior levels of development in the cosmos will incarnate into the human form. Okay, so the highest development at that point was associated with Venus. And then once the Earth got going, it moved, it was even deeper in density, which gave it was even deeper in physicality. So it allowed an even more diversified, more powerful form, more powerful human form to emerge with more faculties, and especially that faculty of the I to really individuate. And so that didn't really happen until Earth, the ability to individuate. And with that power of individuation, which is called the I in anthroposophy, and sometimes it's also associated with manas, or the development of mind as well, that gave us the power to actually spiritualize our physical form out of this material plane. You cannot get out of the material plane, right? Or the moon realm, which traps everything here, unless you spiritualize your form. Unless you literally, over time, live in a way that's in accordance to God and nature, and spiritualize your physical form into a higher and higher and higher form. Okay? Now, this is what the New Age calls ascension and the 5D earth. In anthroposophy, this is the spiritualization of the form, the etherization of the blood, and it is called New Jupiter. In esoteric Christianity, the 5D earth is called New Jerusalem. Okay, there's other names for it also in theosophy in the Eastern tradition, but it's all the same. This is what spiritual science is. Spiritual science is understanding the transformation of the human consciousness and the human form. So spiritual science is not technology, right? It's not like some machine you hook yourself up to, that frequency do. Spiritual science is actually understanding the methodical, exact way in which our consciousness develops and our form actually shifts over time to mirror the sun and the cosmos at large and God. And we are on an ascension path now, which means that we rise in our form, which is symbolized in resurrection, and it's symbolized in ascension. And what's really going on there is that at one point we became ensouled. As soon as we got our individuality, about midway through Atlantis, we sunk deeper into polarity. We got our individuality, we got our I. We began to become ensouled. We are those high Venusian sparks. And from there, we have the opportunity to forge that I, to forge and really develop our soul. So we get the spark, right, in Atlantis, but then we have to develop it through consciousness, through using our mind correctly, through love. And that is the science, is an understanding exactly how, as a human being, your heart, your emotions, your whole energy body, how all of this works to evolve you. That's true science. The true science of the human being, or the true anthroposophy, right? That's what that is. That's what spiritual science is. And all occult science leads there, or it's not occult science at all. Everything leads to how the human being can evolve properly over time with the life wave, with the cosmos at large. Everything eventually comes down to that, because that's really the only thing that matters. Anything else is just debris on the side. If we don't have that understanding, nothing else matters. Everything else is degeneration. So we have to understand the science of the spiritualization of our form, of our consciousness, which means that we have to understand also the history of it, its very formation, its very creation, how it is a cosmic event, how beings from other spheres basically are us, but have gone into our own formation. And how now that we're on the earth and we are in these bodies and we've been in these forms for a long time, there's still part of us that can sense and that knows that there are other realms and there are other worlds, and that there is life on other planets, and that there not only is there life on other planets, but at times there is visitations, right? We know that because that has been the Earth's history, and it's part of human history, and it's part of human evolution. But where the challenge is today is that without knowing certain key aspects, especially without really understanding ensoulment and the solar system as a school, we sort of enter into these ideas in a materialistic way. And we start thinking that, we start thinking about life in the cosmos and basically trying to make certain patterns that existed only in the astral plane or the etheric plane, like that kind of Star Trek ideology, or gods walking amongst us, like things that happened in Lemuria or Atlantis, like things that aren't really possible in our material plane, but were possible at other levels of our development and on other spheres. We start thinking that they're possible here because we don't really understand spiritual law and spiritual science, and we begin to conflate things. We get to conflate what's possible, and we even begin to confuse these two streams and their histories on the planet. So we begin to confuse the angels with the fallen angels. And if you look at the New Age and modern spirituality and also ufology, what you're going to find is that pretty much those fields are teaching the story of the fallen angels. And it's been that way for decades. And that is the main narrative. And basically, we're coming up against this time in our evolution where we're going to be confronted with basically the lie of the fallen angels, because those fallen angels so desperately need to live off of humanity. They need to be worshipped. They need to bind with humanity. They need to attach to humanity for their own survival. So they've set up entire systems on this planet to basically brainwash people and get them to believe a completely different version of human history, a completely different version of human creation, one that draws humanity outside of themselves, outside of organic evolution. And so we have to know that this is coming if we want any chance to face it and address it. And so um, let's get a little bit deeper into the fallen angels and ensoulment, and just prepare ourselves for, the years to come, where one day all of this information will be attempted to be presented and you're going to be ready. All right. So the one key thing here is ensoulment. When I look back at everything that I personally believed when I was in the New Age, I was heavily, heavily into the starseed community and into the cosmic part of the New Age. I think I was actually the first person on YouTube to ever talk about it in 2008 or 2009. And it went that way for a long time, because I had personally had these experiences with beings that were Pleiadian, Venusian, which I now understand is the same stream, but also a specific time on the planet. Usually, how interdimensionals will communicate is they'll give you a star or a planetary sphere, but it's not really like they're from that star in the 3D plane or that planetary sphere in the 3D plane. They're giving you their gate in which they came through, and if they're coming to the planet, then it means that they have a connection to it. There's some kind of developmental connection to the planet. So whatever's here has some kind of genetic connection to us, has some kind of connection to the earth, or is in the same developmental scheme of the earth, though sometimes it can be a little bit removed. Sometimes people will also, I have to say, see what are elemental beings, and they're actually not aliens. They're just an elemental being. They're connected to the earth, but people will think that that's an alien experience and that they're very different or very unusual. But that can be an elemental being. It can also be a tulpa. It can be a chimera. And so when we're looking at this kind of phenomenon, these kind of abduction experiences, these sort of contact experiences, there's actually a lot of different things that could be going on. It is not simple at all. Like I said, it can be a being from another sphere, though that is at this point in our development going to be extremely and exceedingly rare. Probably more likely looking at beings that are already associated with this sphere, that are living within the earth or living in the eighth sphere, or sort of out in the cosmos a little bit because they can't really get in and around the earth due to their fallen nature. So we have to understand, when we're looking at abductions and we're looking at even psychic contact and telepathic contact, that it's really not a simple thing. There's lots of different ways in which it could be coming to you. And so my first experience was through, first spiritual experience had this kind of cosmic, I never had like a negative abduction experience like so many people experience with the Greys and stuff like that. That wasn't so much my experience, but I did remember Venus, and I remembered the Pleiadian connection to Venus as well. And that was really the beginning. But because I didn't understand the traditional teachings around this and the actual esoteric history, I thought that I was literally, being abducted, that I was literally communicating with aliens. And really what was happening was I was just remembering my own lives, and I was really remembering my own self in those realms. And so it just goes to show that you can have an abduction experience, or you can have memories of yourself in other planetary realms. It's become more and more possible as we've moved closer and closer to that Aquarian age. More and more of that energy is opening up to people, and it's becoming easier and easier to tap into that. Even 200 years ago, it was not as easy to tap into information that was outside of the earth plane, you know. So if I had understood the Eastern mysteries, I would have looked at that and been like, oh, okay, this makes sense because we have these waves of souls that are coming from Venus. I would have learned about the Sunat Kumara initiation. And, if I would have studied anthroposophy or the Western mysteries, the reality of souls coming from Venus is also there. Also, the reality of specific star systems like the Pleiades and Sirius, and how they also work to stabilize certain planetary gates. And so, um, if we're not introduced to the right structure, then we can fall into delusion, and that's okay. I mean, part of that is also, I think, deepens our understanding when we can come to this. But I mentioned this story because so much of spiritual awakening and cosmic awakening comes from a genuine experience, a genuine vision, a genuine connection. And then when we start to decipher that experience, interpret that experience, we end up kind of reaching out into the collective consciousness. And we start to try to find how our experience fits into other people's experience. We start reading about people's experiences that are kind of like our experience. So maybe not a Pleiadian or Venusian, but maybe this other kind of being or that other kind of being. And so you start to enter in and be introduced to all of these different interpretations of things that really may or may not be true. And what I didn't come across was the classical information on this that had been safeguarded and vouchsafed from culture to culture to culture to culture. The seven rishis of India, of the great Indian civilization that existed 7,000 years ago, those were the seven great souls from Atlantis that were from Venus. Those were the most highly initiated individuals that contained the solar spark from Venus. That's, and nowadays you'd say that's an alien. That's a star person. That's a star being. That's a being from another world. But that's actually completely incorrect. Those were human beings who were ensouled. Those are human beings with a human body that had ensouled themselves originally from Venus. So the soul essence was coming from Venus before incarnation, not the eighth sphere, not the moon, not, Mars or something like that. So immediately when we look back on these ancient stories, because of our sinking into materialism, we look back and we think of, the Arhats, the Kohans, the Dhyani Buddhas, the even different, if you want to use Christian esoterica, certain angelic divine humans. We're looking at that and we're saying that is other. That's an alien from another world, that's come to humanity for good purposes or bad purposes. And that immediately infantilizes humanity. And the reality is that humanity has not been at that level since about Lemuria. So why are we trying to use this infantilized system that really we haven't actually been in since Lemuria, where we're trying to make these alien beings gods? We're trying to say they're flying around in the Federation, creating humanity, governing humanity, as though humanity can't govern itself, as though we're not actually ensouled. All of the higher beings that came from Venus, which again is the higher Earth. It is the Earth in the future. It is the Earth's future developmental stage. It's where the divine human spark lived at Earth's creation. All those beings that were part of that initiatory wave are ensouled. They're not existing in the Venusian form anymore. They're not from the planet Nibiru. They're not from any other planet. They're here walking amongst you, and they're often called masters and are part of a spiritual hierarchy that is completely associated with the Earth, because the Earth is the planet in the cosmos and in the solar system in which physicalization happens to such an intense degree that it actually allows you to spiritualize into a solar being yourself. And every developmental scheme has been adding up to this and consolidating to this point. And so again, what happens is that there are fallen angels. There are angels that entered into the earth at the natural Venusian Stargate. They actually wanted to bring light to humanity. They actually, the goal was to be a light bearer. Was to bear the light of Manas, was to put the spark of light in humanity, that flame. That's why Lucifer is seen as the light bringer. But the entity Lucifer does not represent Venus entirely, right? So that is an aspect of the story of Venus, right? And so that point of ensoulment is so important to understand, because it seems like it's the part that we're not really getting. We keep looking at beings and saying at beings that are really from another developmental scheme in our solar system school as like gods. And we're hanging on to an old way of consciousness that doesn't even make sense anymore. And if we do that, it's just going to lead to degeneration, because the only way to evolve from this point forward is to develop as an individual, is to use your eye, to use that spark, to use your mind, critical thinking, critical analysis, discernment, to go deep into your shadow, to question yourself, to develop your eye, develop your individuality. And that's what actually develops your soul over time, is the eye. But if you are believing that aliens created humanity, if you are believing that there's a group of aliens that are flying above you in motherships that are controlling the direction of humanity, then you're placing a lot of power outside yourself. If you don't want centralized government on the earth, you think that's dark. And why would you want a bunch of beings that don't even look human anymore governing you from space with no planet of their own? And this is the other thing too about the alien god paradigm, is that every form, the human form is the earth. So your body is made of minerals that are of the earth. Your body's held together by certain biomagnetic frequencies that are the earth. And then on the top, a little bit of the sky, a little bit of star consciousness. Sure, that sun is also holding you together. But really, that physical part of you is the earth. And if human beings leave the earth, the form immediately deteriorates. The mind begins to deteriorate, because there is a spiritual binding nature to being on the planet. And when we are on the planet, we represent the planet. We are her. And we are part of our goal is to evolve with the earth, with Gaia. And as Gaia raises in her frequency and gets less and less dense, right? Every epoch moving forward, we're actually losing matter. We're actually spiritualizing very slowly, life after life. We are, right? This is where that teaching of New Jupiter comes in, and 5D Earth and the new Earth, all of that, New Jerusalem. That is a spiritualization of the Earth too. The Earth is also being transformed and spiritualized. So the idea that there's a bunch of just entities out there flying around in spaceships or a mothership that have no homeworld anymore is actually kind of a satanic ideology, because they no longer have a planet because they betrayed themselves. They're not evolving with their planet. You can't just live in a ship in space. That is what civilizations do that have completely destroyed their world do. There's nothing advanced about flying around in spaceships around another planet. There's nothing advanced about trying to forcefully seed worlds, going to a planet and saying, I'm going to create life on this. The planet doesn't need that. Every planet has a life wave. Every planet comes alive at a certain time. And through waves of development, will develop specific kinds of life in a very specific pattern. It'll develop a certain kind of mineral component, and that will proliferate for a while, and then plant life, and then animal life, and it will begin to come alive. And it's a very complex process that no human being or individuated human being can actually carry out. You actually cannot colonize a planet. You're not God. Now you can try to go to a planet before the life wave begins and try to make your way there, but your form will be completely destroyed because your form is for the earth. Now, even if there was a sweet spot where there was a being from another world going back to their own world or something like that, the reemergence of, say, Mars, for example, the rebirth of Mars, that's a new Mars, right? So when a planet comes alive again after a pralaya period or a death period, that planet is not the same energy as it was when it was alive in its last cycle. It has gone to sleep or it's died, and it has gone through a period of reconstitution in its higher spiritual form, and then that spiritual reconstitution incarnates into the body of the planet, just like a human being. So you're not the same human being life to life to life, right? Neither is the planet. So this idea that there can be these beings from other spheres or these beings from other worlds that are, super advanced, that are living on ships that have no home world, or their home world is destroyed, or they're not on their home world, goes against what we know about how planets and humans evolve in the cosmos. And I think that we believe these stories because we think that if you have a certain kind of advanced technology, that you are advanced. So if you have some kind of miraculous looking technology, like a free energy technology or some crazy technology, that our government actually probably has anyway, that makes you spiritually advanced. That's not the case. You can have complete technological advancement to the point where it looks like someone's actually producing a miracle. It looks like they're actually levitating or doing a spiritual feat or healing or something like that. But it's completely it's total technology. and not the same thing as a spiritual healing or a spiritual feat. It's an illusion. It looks like it. And this is what we are facing, is this belief that if somebody is technologically advanced, that they are spiritually advanced. That if somebody is technologically advanced, that they have the right to lead humanity. Look what's happening with our struggle with technocracy today, with Elon Musk, with all these individuals that, we think that they're like geniuses or something because they've created this advanced technology. But technology is not the marker of human advancement. The development of spirit in the form is. So being human is the marker of advancement, and staying human today is the marker of advancement. So we have to really understand these things, because we are going to be really confronted with them